The Cardinals made their choice for opening day starter official, and Brenden Crawford arrived in Jupiter. All that coming up on B-Shafe Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Shafe Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. It is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024, and we're talking about a couple of topics related to the Cardinals today on the show, as Ollie Marmol on Tuesday morning in the Cardinal dugout there at Roger Dean Stadium made official the announcement that we could pretty much figure was coming for some time. Ever since whatever day right around Thanksgiving, the Cardinals signed Sonny Gray. Yeah, they announced that he's going to start on opening day, March 28th, 2024 in Los Angeles, taking on Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers. That announcement coming officially from the Cardinals on the same day that Sonny Gray made his Grapefruit League debut, pitching at Roger Dean Stadium, starting the game for the Cardinals against the Boston Red Sox. No, there was no Tyler O'Neill making the trip across the state of Florida for this game, but we will talk today on B-Shafe Daily about Sonny Gray's outing, how he looked, how he felt about it afterward, and our general impressions of him taking the ball on opening day. I think that was probably a decision that nobody was surprised by. Again, going back to the day that he was signed, you could look at the five and say, yep, he's the best one. Time to find whether he can be the ace of this rotation or not. And the Cardinals are going to start that right away with Sonny Gray in Los Angeles on March 28th. And he'll be taking on a lineup that probably starts off with Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman. So that'll be a lot of fun. Shohei Ohtani homered, by the way, today in the spring training game between the Dodgers and the White Sox. But guess who else homered in that game? Paul DeJong. How about that? The new White Sox hitting a home run for his new team. But that comes on the same day that the Cardinals officially welcome a new shortstop to the organization, Brenden Crawford. See, it's all connected. Crawford making landfall here in Jupiter, Florida, introduced at the Cardinals complex on the heels of the one-year, $2 million contract that he signs. Yeah, a couple $1 million for Brenden Crawford. So tonight on B-Shafe Daily, we will talk about some impressions from what John Mozeliak had to say, what Brenden Crawford himself had to say about joining the organization. And we also heard from Ollie Marmol about that topic and the Sonny Gray topic as well. So all that's coming up tonight on B-Shafe Daily. Appreciate you guys for joining. If you would like, you can go back on the YouTube channel from earlier Tuesday and check out the pretty much full media availability with Brenden Crawford that I got on video, about 8 minutes long. If you'd like to hear directly from the newest Cardinal, you can do so by scrolling back and checking out that video on the YouTube channel. That will not be probably put up on the Spotify or Apple Podcasts for B-Shafe Daily, but check it out, youtube.com/@BSchaeffer12. And if you enjoy regular Cardinals content throughout the season and off-season and spring training, etc., make sure to hit that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your video on YouTube. Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer, plenty of Cardinals content coming all year round. Let's go ahead and get into it, though, by talking first about Sonny Gray, since I know we talked with some expectations and speculation about Brenden Crawford last night. And you can go check out that episode if you want, but some updated information here today. We'll get first into Sonny Gray, though, because I think this is a move that we all knew was coming. I think it had even been kind of hinted at by different reporters. Derek Gould, I know, wrote about it, but it was never anything that was officially publicly said until today. And, you know, it was just one of those things where Ollie Marmol could pick the day that he wanted to share the information. It was kind of funny in the Cardinal dugout. Jeff Jones tried to ask the question in a very circuitous way, and Ollie kind of gave him some crap and said, if you're going to ask it like that, I was going to tell you the answer, but now I don't think I'm going to. And then he looked at Lynn Worthy, who writes for STL today, and he said, oh, great question, Lynn. Yes, Sonny Gray will be the starter on opening day. So just kind of giving Jeff some trouble. But it was a good time had by all, and ultimately we got the answer that we were looking for. Yeah, Sonny Gray is going to be the guy. Second in the Cy Young vote in the American League last year. The Cardinals signed him to the 3-year contract. You look at the guys that are still here. Yes, they could have maybe gone a route of, hey, Miles Michaelis has been here before, and so we defer to the guy with more service time with the Cardinals. Hey, Lance Lynn's on his way back. Maybe we defer to Lance Lynn and give it. Sonny Gray was the only choice, I think, with where all of these guys are at this stage of their respective careers and the seasons that they're all coming off of. Sonny Gray, again, was second in the AL Cy Young vote. He had like a 2.79 ERA, 184 innings, 183 strikeouts. He was really, really good for the Twins last year. And he comes over to the Cardinals with St. Louis, really hoping that he'll be exactly the same. And to this point, he has been everything the Cardinals could have hoped for and then some in terms of the teammate that he's been and the presence that he's been in spring training. But I also know that there's going to come a point in time where we'll talk in these videos about the games that are counting toward the standings. And what the Cardinals are going to need from Sonny Gray is him to win a lot of those games and pitch really well in those games so that his teammates can help him to those W's, right? It's going to matter how the Cardinals perform. All of these preseason narratives and offseason narratives about veteran leadership and making your teammates better and sharing a nice little anecdote, those are good stories in spring training. I am not naive to the fact that those stories don't matter as much if you get into the regular season and you're not winning. So the Cardinals have got to win games, and Sonny Gray, I think, is a great candidate to be able to help them do exactly that. But it's going to have to happen, and we're going to get to see from the word go, Sonny Gray is the guy that can give them a chance to do it. They're going to face the Dodgers. Like I said, the lineup that Sonny Gray is going to face in that Thursday, March 28th game in Los Angeles is going to be a doozy. Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, and then I think they had Will Smith, the catcher, batting fourth today. That's at least the way that they lined it up in their game today. Having Ohtani slide into that number 2 spot, which I think is smart. I think the 2 spot should probably be your best overall hitter usually. And for the Cardinals, that still might be Paul Goldschmidt. I think that's where he's going to bat in the Cardinal lineup for whatever it's worth. Part of the thought process there is to make sure they get the left-right split near the top of the order. But nevertheless, like Ohtani's going to be a beast wherever they put him in the lineup, and Sonny Gray is going to have to face him. I'm not saying Sonny Gray is going to go out there day one and beat the Dodgers. It would be a great tone setter for the Cardinals season, and I think everybody's going to be eyes glued when that game is played. But nevertheless, we're going to have to wait and see how it goes and acknowledge, too, that as much as Sonny Gray said he was honored to have the opportunity, he has been an opening day starter a couple times before. It's very meaningful to him to get to come into a storied organization like the Cardinals and have that chance from the very beginning of his career with St. Louis. That'll be his official Cardinal debut. But all that being said, it is just one game, and he views it as going to be a full team effort to try and fix what happened last year. He was asked, like, do you view yourself, since you're the opening day starter, do you kind of parlay that into a mindset where, like, you're the stopper, you're the guy that has to put an end to a losing streak and needs to set the tone and needs to, and his response was interesting. He said, yeah, there was a lot of needs to in that question. I don't really view it that way. I think everybody's going to have a chance to be that guy. We need a rotation where one time Miles will be the quote unquote stopper. And sometimes it'll be Lance Lynn, and sometimes it'll be Kyle Gibson and Steven Matz. Like, I think a more cohesive mentality is what Sonny Gray sort of views it at. And I think you're getting the reality and the truth from Sonny Gray when he talks like that, because again, the guy doesn't really do anything or say anything that's for show. I think you're really getting the genuine thought process of the player. So, yes, I think we can contrive that as a narrative in the media and fan base and say if the Cardinals have lost a bunch in a row and it's Sonny's day on the bump, like, yeah, his role is to kind of stop the skid and end that losing streak. But I think right now it's still February, so it was a little bit mindset-wise, I think it was genuine that Sonny Gray is not really to that point of being able to kind of internalize and then vocalize all of what those thoughts are going to be. But starting out in Los Angeles, he acknowledged that's going to be a crazy environment given what the Dodgers have done this offseason. But he said, hey, I mean, the Cardinals have done some things too, and we're excited about where we are after the offseason and so far the spring to this point that the Cardinals have had. So that's kind of interesting as well to hear from Cardinals opening day starter Sonny Gray, who did pitch, by the way, on Tuesday. And I would say he pitched pretty well. It wasn't quite the outing that I think he was looking for. It's very interesting when you go into the Cardinals clubhouse On one of the little pillars in the clubhouse is a little sheet of paper, usually taped up on the pillar, that has the pitcher's schedule for the work week. The work week schedule, the pitcher schedule, whatever you call it, kind of 4, 5, 6 days out in advance. Who's throwing, who's going to be pitching in a game setting, who's going to maybe be getting a live BP on the backfields or a side session for their bullpen work on the backfield mounds, etc. And it's kind of planned out for who throws this many innings and when, and all of these elements are plotted out ahead of time. But when it's most guys, it's, okay, this is a starter, so he's throwing 2 innings. Okay, today we're going to advance a little more. He's going to throw 3 innings in his bullpen, whatever the setting might be. For Sonny Gray, it said 35 pitches. I mean, it actually just said 35. So you could make the joke of, wow, Sonny Gray is so dedicated, he's going to have a 35-inning outing. Because for everybody else, it was innings. It would just say 2 or 1 in parentheses. For him, it said 35. And so, not a typo. I think they just, for whatever reason, logged his in terms of the pitch count. That was the plan for him for Tuesday in the game at Roger Dean Stadium against the Red Sox. I wondered, in part, was that like they're not going to let him exceed 35 in the 2 innings that he would generally throw? Or if he's really efficient, could he go 3 innings? I wasn't exactly sure why they did it that way. I guess I could have asked, but I didn't. But nevertheless, for Gray, he ends up throwing 2 innings, both scoreless, and going over that pitch count of 35. Ended up with 40 pitches and a couple more throws as well, because there were some pickoff attempts involved in the outing. And it was a very interesting moment that happened for Sonny Gray in this outing, as he and Brendan Donovan found themselves on the same page through not the pitch calling for a pickoff or anything other than old-fashioned body language of Brendan Donovan was kind of sneaking behind the runner at second base. And it was fascinating to hear Sonny Gray tell the story about this, and something that I hope to be able to kind of write about, but we're kind of running out of time here as we close the day on Tuesday. Talking about the fact that, like, he just kind of was looking at Sonny Gray and thinking, man, this guy's taking a hell of a leadoff. And Sonny was picking up what he was putting down. He noticed that Brendan was actually looking toward the dugout to maybe, like, are we going to get a signal to, like, get the call for a pickoff? But Sonny Gray was noticing that Donovan was kind of sneaking behind the runner of, like, is this an opportunity to maybe put something on? And Sonny said this, that he just kind of held his glove out in such a way that he was hoping that Brendan would kind of see the signal of, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and if this guy takes that lead again, we're going to run this. And sure enough, Sonny takes a peek back and noticed that Donovan's like breaking to the bag, ready to receive an actual throw. And so they make it happen, and they pick him off. All coming from just intuition and 2 guys being on the same page and noticing those little details. I thought it was a really fascinating story for spring training for a guy in Sonny Gray that's obviously new to the Cardinals. This was his first game action. And in that spring type of setting, it's not very customary that the dugout is going to be putting on that play. Like, yeah, you want to practice like you play in the real games in the regular season, but this early, it's his first spring outing. The Cardinals are probably content to just have Sonny Gray focus on the batters if that's where he is at this point in the spring. But Sonny Gray, we know, is a different sort of breed. And so he was 100% in lockstep with what Brendan Donovan was thinking. And it was just really interesting to hear it described that way, and asked Ollie about it after. And he said, yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was just 2 guys being on the same page, having the instincts for the moment and executing a play. Really kind of interesting to see. And nice for Sonny Gray, because he did end up throwing 40 pitches in 2 innings while having that pickoff, I should say, and a stolen base attempt that Wilson Contreras was able to cut down to get an out as well. Guy trying to steal second. I think there was a successful steal against him, which is maybe how that base runner got to second base that was picked off by Sonny. But then another later attempt was cut down on the bases. Couple of walks for Sonny Gray, a couple of hits allowed. Again, more traffic than he would have wanted, but he was very introspective, as he always is, and said, there's some things that he's going to look to clean up, but at the same time, felt good about getting back out there and getting through his outing the way that he did, having it be scoreless. 40 pitches. Was supposed to be 35, ended up throwing 40, getting out of the jam with a strikeout there, I believe it was in the second inning to end things. Had a couple of Ks on the day, 2 hits, 2 walks allowed. All in all, I think a really solid performance just to kind of shake the rust off. In that first one, you're not really looking too hard necessarily at the box score. I know a guy like Sonny Gray always will, but for Cardinals fans, I think a good one to feel pretty strongly about as he ends up starting on a pretty solid note. So I know today's game was not on television, but if you listened on radio or you're just kind of learning about everything that went down right now, let me know in the comments section below what you thought from Sonny Gray for his first outing officially with the Cardinals here in the Grapefruit League. And what do you think about him being officially named by Oli Marmol the opening day starter for the Cardinals? Now, I don't know what that's going to look like as far as the home opener. I know that's obviously a thought heavy on everybody's mind, given that Cardinals fans flock to Busch Stadium for that game every year. And this year, it's kind of a little bit wonky because they'll start on the road for 7 games and then play opening day without an off day, really. It's just 8 straight days of playing, if I'm not mistaken. They play in Los Angeles on a Thursday, and then the next Thursday is in St. Louis, and there's no off days in between. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to project until we know whether or not they're going to go with a 6-man rotation. We're going to see a lot more from Zach Thompson, Matthew Liberatore this coming week. It'll be Miles Michaelis starting in Port St. Lucie on Wednesday against the Mets. But then I think we'll see more Libby, more Thompson, try to delineate between those two guys eventually. But yeah, it kind of interesting because you do want to know, okay, opening day, Sonny Gray, makes sense. Who's starting the home opener at Busch? That's going to be everybody's obvious next question. So as soon as we get that info, we will continue to pass it along and pass along anything relevant here on the channel. And, of course, KMOV.com/sports, where all my articles are written. Make sure to check those out on KMOV's website. Helps me out for sure. Okay, let's shift gears, though, a little bit and talk about the other news of the day, which was sort of the continuation of what we learned yesterday would be the case. Brenden Crawford joining the Cardinals, and we find out for sure it's a major league deal. 1 year, $2 million is widely reported to have been the salary signed by Brenden Crawford and the Cardinals for this season. Again, a little bit more. I think whether it was Ahmed Rosario, I forget exactly what all of the recent signees at shortstop position signed for, but I think one guy had a $1.5 million. I think Tim Anderson might have been $5 million. So a couple $1 million for Brenden Crawford. He ends up showing in Cardinals camp. We hear from John Mozeliak confirming that they've signed him. We see Brenden Crawford and get a chance to talk to him. I'll start with the housekeeping of sort of the corresponding move to this. Buddy Kennedy has now been designated for assignment. And I want to take a moment just to be like, that kind of stinks for Buddy Kennedy. In Cardinals camp, right? They brought him in the offseason. It was shortly after last season ended that they added him to the 40-man roster. He's a guy that could play a little second, play a little third, has some good offensive stats in the minors, and it's just a little bit tougher when you see the guy. Like, we were having a conversation in the clubhouse with him this morning. At that time, he had already learned that he was the guy DFA'd. But it's just tough, man, because these are humans too, and he was looking for a shot. I'd like to see Buddy Kennedy get a shot somewhere, whether it's clearing waivers and staying with the Cardinals, which I don't know how likely that is, or catching on somewhere else for a chance to kind of join their depth chart. We'll see what that could end up being for Buddy Kennedy, but kind of a move that you say, well, Buddy Kennedy is a much younger player. Maybe he's got upside. The Cardinals brought him in for a reason. Why jettison him for Brenden Crawford, who's 37 and clearly kind of on the tail end of his playing career. But the Cardinals really felt strongly about the need to put a shortstop on this roster, a guy with experience at that position to be able to spell Mason Wynn, but more so, honestly, to be able to know that Tommy Edman can play center field. That's what we talked about last night on the podcast when we were discussing Brenden Crawford before the deal was official. And everything we heard from John Mozeliak and Oli Marmol today echoes those thoughts of, yes, this is very much a move about Tommy Edman and what the Cardinals want to see from him this year. And we acknowledge that right now Edman is not healthy, is not full strength after the wrist surgery. The idea would be, though, that he's going to get there. And so this is a move that happens in February, yes, but it's not really about Tommy Edman's health in February or March. I think it's more about Tommy Edman's freedom to be in one concrete position in June, July, August, September. Forget the timeline of when he's going to be ready. When he's ready, he's going to be the center fielder. He's not an infielder. I've seen a lot of comments on YouTube after last night of, well, Tommy should play second or he should play shortstop. It is totally fine for everybody in Cardinal Nation to have their opinions. I'm totally about that. When I present info, though, I want to be clear, like, this is me presenting info. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Tommy Edman is not going to play second base this year. He's not going to. Now, I guess if Brendan Donovan were hurt and Gorman were hurt and things can change, but the plan is with this group being pretty much healthy, Edman's your center fielder. Dylan Carlson's going to mix in. He can play any of the three outfield spots, but Tommy Edman's going to play center field, and he's not playing shortstop either. You might think he's a nice shortstop. He's not going to play there. He's their center fielder. This could not be more clear coming from the Cardinals either. This is not just my opinion. I'm telling you what's going to happen. This is why they did the Brandon Crawford move. It's to keep Tommy Edman in center field. Because it's been the position of the team going back to, for sure, December at the winter meetings in Nashville. But I think probably even before that, they had the GM meetings in November, wherever that was held. I think maybe out in Arizona. That's not an event that I was at, so I couldn't tell you the quotes that were given by John Mozeliak at the time, But it's basically been said the entire way through that, okay, yeah, we value the idea of a more consistent defensive alignment for our team next year, and we want to find a way to accomplish that. For a while, they talked about it ideally, in a perfect world, you do this. And the reason that they had to kind of be wishy-washy and a little more vague was because they didn't have the roster in place. As I put it in a tweet yesterday, the roster math was not mathing. You could say we want Tommy Edman to be our center fielder, and you could say we don't want to have our guys move around as much, save for maybe one utility guy like a Brendan Donovan. It's nice to say all those things, but to put the roster together to allow for it is another. And until today, officially, they didn't have that in place, and now they do. Brandon Crawford, although he says, I'm happy to play second, short, third, whatever, he's only ever been a shortstop in his career outside of one scoreless inning as a pitcher, which was something he brought up today. He said, I've only ever played shortstop, obviously, except for that one shutout inning that I threw, which was oh, yes, you did need to specify. It was a shutout inning. Again, if you want to see him talking about that, it's in the video on the channel. Scroll back. Brandon Crawford talks about whatever is the name of the title of the video. It's 8 minutes long. Really kind of a funny moment from Brandon Crawford, who I think Cardinals fans are going to like, by the way. I think they'll be endeared to this guy. He talked a lot about how, honestly, it was his kids that, he's got young kids that wanted him to continue playing. Said his 8-year-old son is really into baseball, could probably name the entire Cardinal roster, but better than he could. But Goldie, Arenado are two guys that his son is a fan of, 8-year-old son. So, he said for his kids he wanted to continue playing, which you might say, all right, that's not super enthusiastic. Well, I'm only doing it because my kids wanted me to, and it's a couple $1,000,000. It's not verbatim what he said, but you did get the vibe that, the decision happened early for him in the offseason of, yes, I want to continue pursuing this. Yes, probably even if that means not with the Giants. He said he felt very little anxiety about it because he knew that if it didn't work out for him to get an offer from the right team, that he could be content into retiring and spending more time with his kids and his family. But his kids want to be at the ballpark, it sounds like. So that was a driving force. He said, I'm not going to lie about that. But another driving force was the fact that he doesn't want to end it the way it went last year when we talked about it last night. But a 587 OPS, -14 defensive runs saved. I did see a tweet from somebody, or maybe it was a YouTube comment, regarding his outs above average, which was another one of those defensive metrics that we have to recognize. Defensive runs saved is not the only thing. Outs above average, and I'll read it from the StatCast definition here on the Baseball Savant website, is the cumulative effect of all individual plays a fielder has been credited or debited with. making it a range-based metric of fielding skill that accounts for the number of plays made and the difficulty of those plays. So another way of looking at, overall defensive value, he ranked much better in outs above average, recording 6 outs above average, which was 48th in baseball, maybe among qualifiers. I got to see exactly what the innings load is to qualify for this. But for reference, there's 200 and some odd players on this list. He could have been a lot lower than 48th. So maybe not all metrics consider that Brandon Crawford was terrible defensively last year. And I appreciate the I think it was a YouTube comment. I appreciate the commenter who brought that into my attention, because I did. I looked at defensive runs saved. I was pressed for time and probably should have done a deeper dive before going, he was toward the bottom of the defensive runs saved metric. Outs above average, his range-based fielding appreciates him a little bit more as one of the, better defenders in baseball. And again, part of it was injuries. Nobody wants to hear, he was only bad because of injuries, not because he was 36 years old and now he's 37. Impossible that it could be an age-related decline. Well, sure, I get the skepticism there. And maybe he comes out this year and it's, I had a YouTube commenter say the Cardinals are so obsessed with Matt Carpenter that they're collecting all of the Matt Carpenters, and that Brandon Crawford is more like the Matt Carpenter of the shortstop position, which was admittedly a little funny, albeit mean. I try to take the YouTube comments in stride. Some of them, if you personally attack when I'm just out here trying to give you guys free videos and good stuff to enjoy as Cardinals fans, then I might get a little pissy about it. But generally, if you're just kind of cracking fun, I try to just let you be. But on the Carpenter one, I was like, okay, collecting all the Matt Carpenters is, that was funny. Not, like I said, not super nice. Not something that I would say, hey, Matt Carpenter, what do you think about this? But I understand you're Cardinals fans. You want to let off some steam. That's okay. But when it comes to Brandon Crawford, there may be some merit to the idea that, look, he dealt with hamstring and knee injuries throughout last season. If you hear Ollie Marmol talk about it, and Ollie has only had some brief conversation with Crawford as of our meeting with him this afternoon, he said they'll sit down tomorrow at more full length and kind of talk about a game plan for him ramping up into spring, which I wouldn't expect to see him in games for a couple weeks. Mo said maybe by mid-March that would be a nice target, because he said, I've not been on the baseball field, right? Whatever workouts he's been doing, it's not been, probably as substantial as what you're going to be doing at spring training. So he'll have 3, 4, 5 workouts, practices, and then kind of go from there, I think, in terms of what the plan's going to be. But hearing Ollie explain sort of his awareness level of what Crawford was going through last year, it sounds like he was playing through a lot of pain, and is that type of player that, as Mo put it, he's wants to be out there every day. He's going to play through stuff. He's going to tell you he's fine. The type of guy that if he is an everyday player in a key part of your team, you probably have to keep an eye on and kind of protect him from himself at times, take him out of the lineup, even though he's going to want to be in there every day. Seems like Goldie, that kind of guy sometimes maybe he should DH this time so that he can kind of be off his feet, that kind of thing. But with Brandon Crawford now, it's not going to be a concern because he's not going to be the everyday shortstop. And I think there is an element to maybe the Cardinals get more out of him with the realization that he doesn't have to push through stuff because he's mostly going to be resting if the team's at full health, which I think is important. But it's interesting to talk about, too, and hear sort of the thought process from the team where Mozeliak was asked, hey, you don't have very many righty bats off the bench. We talked last night about the alignment. Herrera as the backup catcher, which is typically a player that they're not eager to use in pitch hitting and in such scenarios if he's not in the lineup to begin with. And if he's going to be in there as a catcher with Wilson DHing, there are going to be some challenges to that at times. But nevertheless, Ivan Herrera, right-handed bat, that's great. But Carpenter and Brandon Crawford, left-handed bats. And then you have Dylan Carlson, who he is that fourth outfielder, and he can be a right-handed bat as a switch hitter because he's typically pretty good against left-handed pitching from the right side. But also you sort of need to recognize that if you put him in as a pinch hitter, you don't have the ability to slide in an outfielder later on. Once you're bringing him in, it may be a scenario that he comes in for defense, Jordan Walker leaves the game. Like, you start to think about late game scenarios. Carlson probably goes to right. Tommy stays in center because they're not going to be moving Tommy around, even though we feel good about Dylan as a center fielder on this podcast. I think if Tommy's in there, he's going to remain in center. That's kind of the genesis of this move, is like the Cardinals want him to have that consistent spot, make it his own, and chase a Gold Glove. Like, be great and help your pitching staff in the process of doing that. Another angle on this, Mason Wynn was told about Brandon Crawford signing a couple days ago, I think Sunday, before he had a 3-hit day. He said today, and I wasn't there for this anymore, I had to get going back to my Airbnb to do my radio show, but I saw from everybody reporting on Twitter that he basically said, learning about the Cardinals signing Crawford, who, again, that's a position that Mason Wynn plays, and Mason Wynn in his MLB career has had a cup of coffee in September. Like, he's not a guy who's been a mainstay in the major leagues. Like, he's still has that mindset of trying to earn it, which is good. He said it lit a fire under his ass. Ollie sharing that Mason's discussion with him, when Ollie kind of had that talk with him and explained what the deal was. Mason said, that's fine. I never want to come into this camp as though the job isn't one that I have to earn, right? I shouldn't come in. I'm not going to come into this camp. I never would want to, thinking that I had this job in the bag. So I think Cardinals fans are already very fond of Mason Wynn and the way he goes about things, but that's another really kind of a feather in his cap to hear from the Cardinal manager about how he reacted to learning that the team had just signed a shortstop who's basically been an everyday player for the last 13 years. I don't think it's going to be that way in St. Louis. All indications are that Mason's going to be the guy, and I don't think Mason's going to struggle, so I don't think it's going to be even like a controversy at all. But it is, I mean, if you're a rookie 21-year-old shortstop and the team specifically signs a guy and says, yeah, he's not going to play anything but shortstop, and he's also been a starter in the big leagues for 13 years, I mean, that if you don't handle that right internally with like the messaging to your young player, that could have an issue, right? You could see the psyche of a guy being shaken. Not Mason Wynn, and not in this Cardinal clubhouse, because I think Ollie handled it and had the conversation, and by all accounts, it went exactly the way you'd hope that it would, and Mason took it in the right way. Because, again, this is not about Mason Wynn as much as it's about Tommy Edman not being needed to play the infield. They like his range. His instincts were tremendous in center field, and he had never played it really at this level. So let him have an off season where he can think about that, and then when he's healthy, he comes into spring, and whenever that might be, thinking about just playing center field, and I think you'll get really good production out of him defensively from that position. So something else to kind of think about when it comes to this move to grab Brandon Crawford. Another element is, okay, this is just another one of those Matt Carpenter's adding the veteran, more voices for the room. It's kind of nauseating at this point because we've talked so much about it. Here's what I'll say. Mozeliak said, like, yeah, that's not really what this was. We specifically needed a shortstop. This is not like Matt Carpenter 2.0. The position-specific help at shortstop was what drove this decision, more so than let's get another old guy to be helping out the veteran leadership quotient of the clubhouse. Yeah, that's always a nice bonus, and he said you never want to dismiss that Brandon Crawford's had a bunch of postseason and big league experience and has been around the block. Like, he beat the Cardinals in postseasons, right? Like, 2012 NLCS, I think 2014 was another playoff series. So, like, he's gone against these Cardinals. The Cardinals have seen what that looks like, and now he's going to be on the St. Louis side of it and be able to sort of invest some of that wisdom that he has in a new crop of players in St. Louis. But kind of interesting to see. And also, by the way, interesting to hear not only just Brandon Crawford says his kids want him to play, so he's playing. He wants to prove that last year doesn't have to be the way that it ends for him. But it's also interesting to hear he basically was like, there's only a couple teams that play their spring training in Florida that I would have gone to. It's like, I mean, if anybody's offering you $2 million and your kids want to play and you want to play, you probably take it. But he's an Arizona guy who was living in Arizona, has done Arizona spring training for 13 years. Everybody that's seen both kind of says that the Arizona spring training is set up better than Florida, but Cardinals are a Florida team. I wonder if they paid a little bit more just because it's like, hey, I know we're in Florida. I know you're an Arizona guy, but we really kind of feel that we need you. And so that's how it maybe gets up to $2 million. Wouldn't surprise me if that was part of it, just to make sure like that he was in. And also when you think about Tim Anderson signing and Ahmed Rosario signing and Kike Hernandez signing, I think there was one more as well over the past week. Oh, Nick Ahmed, which is the guy that we kind of thought might end up being the Cardinals guy. And then he signs with the Giants, which I think kicks it into gear for Brandon Crawford. Like, I'm not getting an offer from San Francisco at this point. They just signed my replacement. Decision time. And so I think that's why it's happening all this week. That's what sort of moved. When the market moved, the Cardinals said, yeah, we probably can't wait much longer to do this deal. So the Cardinals get it done. Brandon Crawford, the newest shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals, won't be the starter. How many games will he play? It's impossible to say because if the right guy gets hurt, like if Mason Wynn gets hurt, he'll probably play a lot. But if Mason Wynn plays 140 games, you'll probably see Brandon Crawford start 20 and pinch hit and be a defensive assistant at some form or fashion in another 20, 25. Like he'll probably play 50 games. It's not going to be a ton, and the starts will be half that if Mason Wynn takes this job and runs with it like I think a lot of folks expect him to do. So all kind of interesting thoughts there as it pertains to Brandon Crawford signing with the Cardinals, a couple $1 million. He's going to be the backup for Mason Wynn, and it means Tommy Edman, when healthy, is going to be able to play center. We don't really know fully when that's going to be. It's going to be a slow play until it's not, and then once he ramps up, I think we'll go, oh, he's in spring games. It looks good. He probably makes the roster. Everything's good there. And the other thing I still kind of want to get a better sense of is Brendan Donovan. How much shortstop do they think he could play if necessary? Kind of makes him redundant at that position, given that Crawford's also a left-handed bat. But again, the Cardinals view the notion of having more right-handed bench help as less important than getting their starting defensive alignment where they want it to be. And that has everything to do with Edman in center field and then filling in the pieces around that because everybody else is going to have that consistency. I'm still watching to see whether they try to move Lars Nootbaar towards center field. If you start to see that in Grapefruit League play, I'll tell you, I don't think it's a good prediction for Tommy Edman to be ready health-wise for the opening day roster. The more center field Nootbaar plays in spring, the less likely to me it is that Tommy's going to be ready for opening day because I think otherwise they're going to keep Nootbaar in left. That would be their desired role for him because, again, they want everybody to kind of stay consistent. And I think that'll be better for them defensively. I think it'll be better for the pitching staff, knowing that they've got a consistent, stable defense behind them, and everybody can kind of thrive as a result of that. I think that's really all I wanted to talk about, though, today. We've gone over on time. I try to stick to 30 minutes. I never do. I did have somebody say 15 minutes is what you need to shoot for. And I had to say, but it's not going to happen because some people say, oh, your podcasts are too short. I have an hour commute, so I need it to be longer. And some people say, oh, you talk too long. Do it 15 minutes. I got to be real. I'm going to do me. Appreciate you guys for caring enough to chime in with the comments. Keep doing so. Please do keep it respectful. But I'm not going to be able to necessarily cater to your every whim, but sometimes I can. If it's something that's a suggestion that I can do, better believe that I will try to make that happen. But that is going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys as always. Cardinals will be in Port St. Lucie on Wednesday. I will not be making the trip for that game, about an hour north here in Jupiter area to Port St. Lucie. It's like 45 to an hour, depending on traffic. But we'll see if there's anything relevant that comes of it that I need to talk about in a podcast on Wednesday. But for now, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Be Safe Daily. Peace.